I used to live on the second floor of a small apartment building in the city. It was a modest space, but I liked it. I had a tiny living room, a small kitchen, and a comfortable bedroom. My favorite part of the apartment was the balcony, which overlooked the courtyard of my complex. One night, I went to bed late and fell asleep right away. I woke up at 3 a.m. to some sounds from my balcony. I sat up in bed, wondering if I was dreaming, but then I heard the sound again, clearer this time. I got out of bed and tiptoed to the balcony door, peeking through the curtains. I saw someone standing there, a man, tall and lanky. He was facing away from me. I looked away and then hid behind the wall. I then realized that I'd left my balcony door unlocked. I hardly ever locked it because I never considered that anyone could get up there. I carefully reached over and locked the balcony door, careful not to startle the man. Then I called the police. I fumbled with my phone, hardly able to hold it. I dialed 911 and waited for someone to answer. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher said. I need the police, I whispered, trying to be quiet. There's someone on my balcony, I added. Are you safe? Is the door locked? The dispatcher asked. Yes, I locked it. Please hurry, I pleaded. Okay, stay on the line. Someone will be there soon, he said. I stood there and waited, peeking through the curtains every few seconds. He didn't seem to notice I was there. He just stood there, staring off my balcony. A minute or so passed, and I started to feel like the police weren't coming. I wondered if they had forgotten about me, or if they didn't think my situation was serious enough. I considered calling again, but I didn't want to make too much noise and draw attention to myself. Suddenly, the man turned around and looked right at me. I gasped and stepped back, bumping into my bed. He walked over to the balcony door and started rattling the handle. He was muttering something to himself, but it's not clear what he was saying through the balcony door. I panicked and ran to the opposite side of the room. I didn't know what to do. Should I hide, fight back, or scream for help? I could hear him pounding on the door. I think he was trying to break the glass with his body, or maybe he was kicking it. I'm still not sure what it was. He was definitely trying to get in, though. Just then, I heard sirens. The police had finally arrived. I felt relieved because the banging had stopped. I ran back to the balcony door and watched the man as he climbed over the railing and disappeared into the night. That's when I noticed a series of large cracks on my balcony door. He was almost in. The door just barely held. The police arrived seconds later. They asked me to describe the man and took notes on what happened. They said they would patrol the area and try to find him. I spent the rest of the night wide awake. I couldn't fall back asleep. I kept replaying the incident in my mind, wondering what could have happened if I hadn't locked the door in time. I felt violated and scared, like my home wasn't safe anymore. The next few days were tough. I had trouble concentrating at work and felt nervous every time I came home. I started double-checking the locks on all my doors and windows, making sure everything was secure. I don't think the guy was ever caught, because I never heard back from the police. When my landlord fixed the broken glass on my balcony, he added metal bars for added security. Every apartment on the first and second floor was offered the same thing. It's really sad that it's necessary, but I feel safer knowing that it's there. I live in an old apartment building. I've been there for about 2 years, and my roommate and I have a few scary experiences. This is one that happened last summer. It was around 4 in the morning when we were woken up from a dead sleep by fire alarms going off throughout the entire 4-story building. Seeing as this place was occupied mostly by seniors, we figured somebody had left a pot on the stove again. I grumbled and blindly grabbed for a blanket. Last time we had a false alarm, I was left shivering and barefoot on the sidewalk, waiting for the fire department, and I was not about to let that happen again. My roommate and I put on our shoes. I grabbed my phone and keys, and we poked our heads out into the hallway. Nothing seemed off. The hall was empty. No one else had come out of their apartments yet. Reluctantly, my roommate and I walked down the hall towards the lobby. We figured our neighbors would follow suit. It was only when we went through the lobby and out the front door that we realized that something was actually wrong. A handful of people who had already come out of the building were running and shouting about how the building was actually on fire this time. We followed them around to the side of the building, as more people fled in their pajamas, and to our horror, we saw that the top floor of the apartment was belching out flames. People were frantic, searching for water, a ladder, or anything. Someone remarked that there was a lady who lived in the apartment with mobility issues, and she needed to be rescued immediately. We were all wondering where the fire department was. My roommate was quite disturbed by the whole scene, so we decided to go back to the front of the building, away from the fire. On our way, we saw a guy jump off his balcony to the ground. He rolled when he landed, but I think he was still really hurt, judging by how he sat on the grass and groaned for a while. He was lucky that he was only on the second floor. There was chaos, yelling, screaming, and an odd mix of panic and disinterest, especially among the senior citizens who didn't want to leave the building because using the stairs was so difficult. The fire department arrived much quicker than they ever had before, seeing that this was a real emergency. It wasn't long before old ladies in nightgowns were being rescued with ladders and wheeled off to the hospital next door. At one point, the man who lived below the apartment that was on fire had a screaming episode at one of the landlords. This guy looked like a walking skeleton with an oxygen tank and a scooter. By the time the fire department got everything under control, it was around 6 or 7 a.m. The sun was up, and people were beginning their morning commutes. The fire department had blocked off our whole street, which must have been a pain, and the entire population of my building sat on the curb in pajamas and blankets. Little kids, old people, broke college guys, and everything in between. The community really pulled together that morning. The public bus service gave us a couple of buses to sit in and warm up instead of standing around on the chilly sidewalk. Paramedics handed out blankets and assessed injuries. The people in the surrounding houses were kind enough to bring us water and snacks. One lady brought out a serving tray with mugs of tea from her own kitchen and offered it to anyone she could find. My mom came down to rescue my roommate and I, even though she lived an hour outside of town and hadn't even showered yet. She brought us breakfast and a change of clothes. We didn't know when we'd be allowed back in the building. The most disturbing details of what had just taken place that morning came to us as we were waiting for the bus. Everyone was talking about the fire, of course, but one man had a particularly horrifying detail to add. He'd heard through the grapevine that the lady whose apartment caught fire never made it out of the building. Sadly, we suspected as much, with her mobility issues and all, but there was more. The firefighters apparently found her in the hall. She'd made it out of her apartment, but couldn't escape the smoke. Whether she died from smoke inhalation or from burns, we aren't sure. But one thing that man said sticks with me. Someone said that as they stood outside and watched the flames, they could hear the woman screaming. I've always been afraid of burning to death, and the idea that my neighbor may have had such a horrifying end is deeply disturbing. I know the man who lived below her heard her screaming. He wouldn't stop talking about it. I think he ended up with a form of PTSD from the event, and I don't blame him. We were all brought to the community center where the fire department and emergency response volunteers helped bring some clarity to the situation. Everybody was very kind and sympathetic to us. Whatever we needed, they provided for us. I think all of that is pretty standard procedure, but still, I was extremely thankful to the kindness of the volunteers, firefighters, paramedics, and Good Samaritans. It was pretty surreal to be in a situation like that. We had almost nothing on us. My roommate hadn't thought to grab her phone, so she had to borrow mine to let her family know she was okay. We had no money, no ID, none of the essentials, and we had no idea how long we would be homeless. I hadn't been so happy to have my mom with me in a long time. I felt like a scared little girl, even though I didn't show it. We were lucky. The fire happened on the opposite side of the building from us. Our unit was totally unaffected, and we were one of the few allowed back into our apartment that same day. The building stuck of smoke for weeks though. Even though the fire took place on the 4th floor in a single apartment, the damage was extensive. Even on the ground floor, the walls were blackened with ash. When they attempted to start fixing up the building, they found asbestos in the walls. A few people were forced to move from their apartments, and we're talking about people who had been there for around 30 years. I remember that night we were allowed back into our apartment. I wanted to box up my most important possessions and keep them in my car, as if I thought the building was going to catch fire again. My home didn't feel the same anymore, and it wouldn't for several weeks. It would take a long time for us to hear anything about what caused the fire. Last I heard, a space heater was to blame, but I don't know for sure. In the days that followed, the fire was featured on the front page of the local newspaper. The family that lived just down the hall from us was featured in the picture. The article spelled out details that I had already known. It labeled the guy that lived below the fire as a hero for attempting to save the lady upstairs. It was a valiant effort, but there was nothing that he could have done without endangering himself. I feel sorry for him, and I often wonder if the guilt keeps him up at night. Sometimes I think about the lady who passed away in the building. I listen to a lot of ghost stories, so I wonder if her spirit haunts this place. Her sudden and horrifying death would have been the sort of thing to make a ghost linger on Earth. So many things are left unfinished. Regardless, I hope she's at peace, and I hope that my neighbors have been able to find some semblance of peace as well. 4 months later, and we've regained some sense of normalcy. Things are back to the way they were before, if you ignore the orange tarps around the side of the building, the restoration vans that come and go every day, and the security guards stationed in the lobby. The damaged wing is still closed while they try to sort out the asbestos situation, but for those of us who live on the other end of the building, things are relatively normal, and I hope they stay that way. This happened a couple months ago, and I've since moved to the other end of the country. I'm 14 currently, so I was 13 when this happened. I have a room with a small TV that's in the middle of the house. We lived in a nice neighborhood, so this was unexpected. It was around 11:30 p.m., so that's very late for me. I went to my bed with Bella, who's our German Shepherd. She's only 1, but she has a lot of energy. I got my pajamas on and went to bed. My bed faced my closet, which I've been scared of ever since I saw the movie Insidious. I closed my closet every night after watching it. When I was going to bed, Bella was sort of looking at the door with her ears up, but not growling, just observing. This creeped me out, and I just wanted to fall asleep. I went to sleep, but later I woke up to Bella growling at my closet. I was starting to get chills down my spine, and I wanted to scream, but I didn't. My closet just had a push door, so anyone could open it. Bella's growl turned into a full-on bark. My eyes shot over to the closet, and I could see half a face looking at me. I sent out the most blood-curdling scream a boy could let out. Bella lunged at him and grabbed his arm with her jaws. Then I heard my dad charging across the floor to my room. My dad busted down the door, holding his hunting shotgun. My dad is a big guy, and well-versed in combat training. Bella was still latched to his arm. She was very obedient, even at her young age. My dad told her to let go. He grabbed the stalker by the neck and dragged him outside with my toy handcuffs in his hand. I followed him and heard the screams of my family as he was dragging him out. My dad wrestled him to the ground and had him pinned. He handcuffed him and my mom called the police. After 10 minutes, the police arrived and put him in proper handcuffs. But as he was getting into the car, he gave me a look of pure insanity, the kind that makes your soul cry. I've gone to therapy and have moved far, far away. When I was 5 years old, I lived in BC, Canada. That was before my parents divorced, and my mom moved back to Edmonton to be closer to family and friends. We didn't have a place to stay, so my aunt and uncle decided to take us in until we found a home of our own. Me and my bro were forced to sleep in the basement. It was a very large open room where our cousins, uncle, and aunt stored the toys they had. My cousins were both girls, and I was 5 years old and a very petite boy. At the time, I was almost skin and bones, and my younger brother was a plump, chubby little 3-year-old. He and I didn't like the basement. The windows showed about a 1 foot by 2 foot space that looked outside towards the tree line. Most of the time, my brother and I would look outside during the winter and see deer, coyotes, and the rare moose. One day during the night, my brother said he saw something outside the window that was white and foggy looking. This scared my brother and I badly, and he and I stayed in the room with our mom that night. Over the next 6 months while we lived there, more and more creepy things occurred. We had one of those old-fashioned spring-loaded rocking horses. My cousins loved to play on it. It was a toy me and my brother would avoid like the plague. The thing would rock by itself during the day and during the night, and it scared our cousins and us half to death. It got so bad that our parents decided to throw it in the garbage. Also, we had one of those super old McDonald's Finding Nemo toys. You had to squeeze it hard to make it talk. The creepy thing is that we put it in the basement washroom in the bathtub for me and my bro to play with. When we went to have a bath, the messed up thing is that it would go off repeatedly during the night. It scared my mom as well, since she had no explanation for why it would go off only at night. If it went off all day long, that could be explained by a software issue or something, but it only went off around midnight and until around 5 or 6 a.m. That was just a tiny part of the story of that house. Here's the really scary part. When I turned 6, on my birthday, I actually remember this vividly. I plainly remember seeing someone standing in the corner of the room, and no one other than the little ones in my family could see it. That includes my cousin, my brother, and all my friends who came to my birthday at the Acreage. One moment he wasn't standing there, another moment he was back. All the kids at the party started crying and pointed to the corner where we could see the man. The adults wandered to the corner where we saw him. My mom freaked out because she hit a cold spot and said it chilled her to the bone. Multiple parents experienced this as well, and after that happened, almost everyone except my close family left.